here's where my story fits in. My dad was pretty good. It's me and my dad when I was probably about 6 years old. Yes, I did look more Asian when I was younger. My dad, and I was an only child. There was never a time in my life where I did not doubt that my father loved me. He would come home every day after working late 12 hours, and he'd have a gift for me almost every day. Whenever we'd go out, he'd let me know, I love you, whatever you want, Nick, I got for you, whatever, all this kind of stuff. I didn't doubt for 1 second ever in my life that I was not loved by my father. It was the problem. My father had me when he was 50 years old. Every time we went out, people would say, hey Nick, is that your grandfather? No, it's my dad. Because of his history, he was in Europe, he suffered in concentration camps, he was part of wars and all this kind of stuff. He wasn't educated. So when every other parent was every other kid in my school was bringing homework home to get help from their dad, my dad couldn't help me. I knew he loved me, but he couldn't help me. You know, and growing up, I had to become very independent because my father got sick when I was only 12 years old. So all of a sudden, I had to take care of him instead of he taking care of me. And I created this mentality in my mind that I know that God loves me. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that He cares for me. But God can never meet my needs. He can't provide for me. I got to do it myself in my own strength. And I went through life praying as hard as I could, fasting, doing everything I possibly could to get stuff done because I thought that God couldn't do it for me. That was my issue that I had to work through. And there's a lot of different areas. We'll go through it real quick. Authority, for example, that's an area where maybe your parents were hard on you. There's a lot of yelling and screaming, so we think that that's how God is. Or maybe faithfulness, in terms of there's a lot of broken promises. Maybe our dad says, yeah, you know what, if you do this, I'll get that for you. And you did it and you never got it. And you're like, oh, shoot. But that translates into God. God doesn't keep His promises. He just tells us things in order to get us to do stuff. You see? Generosity. You know, sometimes we have very generous parents who like to give their kids everything, but most of the time, and fill the sentence in for me because I heard it growing up, I came home, I said, Dad, can you get me this? And you know what he said? Money doesn't grow on... Yeah. And so I thought, oh, well, money doesn't grow on trees. And so that means we only get what we need. And sometimes we can't even get what we need because there's not enough. And so in my relationship with God, I thought, well, God can't meet all my needs because money doesn't grow on trees. Well, in heaven, it grows on the streets. But down here, you know, that's what generosity, affection, maybe physical touch. You know, maybe our fathers never hugged us and kissed us when we were growing up. Or even broken communication. I mean, psychology says this, 58% of communication is through eye contact. You know, 35% is through tone of voice, and 7%, only 7% is through words. Example, Frank, I love you. Do you believe me? No? 7% words. You're so freaking great. And so maybe, you know, that's what happened. There's communication barriers. And all of this, all that we're talking about here leads to storge love. We've heard of different kinds of love in the Bible. Agape love, unconditional love, filial love, tender affection. Eros love means romantic love. And here's storge love, family love. It's where we get this concept of storks. You know where storks came from? It's this family love. And the thing is, if we don't get this love from all these different areas as we're growing up from our parents, it leads to a love deficit. And inside of our hearts, we all of a sudden can't relate to God as Dad and Him to us, and we can't receive His love because most of us have the Father misrepresented to us. And so it's very hard for us to have a relationship with God as Father. And so that's why we got to get past this. We have to understand Dad's love. And in here, we're just going to identify. You say, well, Nick, how do I know if I have these issues? How do I know if there's areas in my life that because of the Father's heart and Father's love, I can't relate to God as Dad? There are two main responses. Everybody say two. Two responses that show us that we don't have or we don't know God as Father, the love of God as Father. And we learn them from the story of the prodigal son. I'm going to read the story real quick just in case you don't know it. And we're going to see the two scenarios of people, Christians who don't know the Father's heart for the Father's love. Luke 15:11-32 says this. Jesus continued, and there was a man who had two sons. The younger son said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. And not long after that, the younger son got together all he had. He set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth with wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out a citizen of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but not even the pigs would give him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare here, and I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I've sinned against you and against heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your slaves, your hired men. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son. He threw his arms around him and he kissed him, and even the son said, Father, I've sinned against you and against of heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father interrupted him and said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, but he's now alive. He was lost, and he's now found. So they begin to celebrate. Now hear this. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field, and when he came near to the house, he heard the music and the dancing, and he called one of his servants and asked him, and said, what was going on? Your brother has come home, he replied, and your father has killed a fattened calf because he is back home safe and sound. The older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered and said, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and you've never disobeyed your orders, yet you've never given me even a young goat that I could celebrate with my friends. But when a son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because the brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost, and now he's found. See, in this story, there are two sons. How many sons? Two. Both had issues. Both didn't understand God's love. One ran away from home and he wasted his money on wild living and all sorts of stuff. The other stayed home and he did his religious duty. See, the younger son got caught up with alcohol, sex, prostitutes, all this kind of stuff. The older one was working hard and fulfilling his obligations. Both were lost. Both didn't know their father's love. Both of them. Both didn't experience intimacy. See, there's two basic problems. When you don't understand God's love and can't relate to Him as a father, there's two basic problems. Number one is immorality. You end up drifting into immorality, doing a whole bunch of stuff, looking for love in all the wrong places, trying to fill that void. Or the other one is religiosity, trying to earn the love that you think you deserve. See, one goes to find love in all the wrong places. The other one tries to earn it through works. Both are lost and they don't know Dad. Think about this. Obviously, the first one is easy to identify. The younger son. Son, a lot of ambition. He's like, Dad, I want to make something with my life. Give me my estate, I'm going to go out. But he went out without knowing God as father or his dad as a perfect father. He didn't know love. And so he started looking for love in all the wrong places. That's what most people do in the church. They come to church, they're like, I want love, I try to experience love from God, I don't get it, I don't understand it, so I'm going to go out and try the world. The church doesn't work for me. And they go out, they try the world, they sex, drugs, alcohol, rock and roll, whatever it is, and the very thing that they're trying to find to fill their hearts with love is the very thing that's distancing them from God, the only person who can provide the love. And that's the younger son. Immorality. Looking for fulfillment in the world instead of God, and they don't get it. Question, is that you today? Do you have a love void in your heart because you didn't receive storge love, and as a result we try to look for love with friends and family and boyfriends and girlfriends and spouses and all sorts of things because we can't find it in the church or where we're looking for. That's one type. Second type is the older son. A little harder to identify because everything on the outside seems right. He's going to church, he's doing the good things, he's serving the dad in the fields, everything looks like it's going well. In fact, I knew this girl, her name was Sarah. She was the greatest leader in my church at the time. Worked hard, prayed all the time, read her Bible, leading tons of people, doing great things. And every week she'd come to me and say, Nick, I still don't feel full. I feel so distant from God despite how I work, despite what I do. See, she's an older son. Same thing, working for love but not finding intimacy. In fact, look what the scripture says. Just look at the bold parts. He wasn't even in the Father's house. It said he was in the field and he had to come into the house because he didn't have intimacy with the Father. Look what his argument was. All these years, paraphrase, I've been going to church, God. I've been doing all this stuff. I've been trying to be a good Christian. I've been reading my Bible, all this kind of stuff. I've been slaving over you and I have never disobeyed your orders. He still turns around and says, look, you don't know love because you're not receiving it. Because you thought Christianity was about doing instead of being. See, this type of person falls into religiosity. We're going to define it as just attempting to earn love. attempting to earn blessings through good works. The thing that Christianity is about doing and not being religious strife.